Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching this weekly in-depth ag forecast for Ag Carolina and Ag South Farm Credit, brought to you by Nutrient Ag Solutions. I want to talk to you about this upcoming pattern because we've been tucked underneath a large ridge of high pressure as of late, which has continued to drive good moisture away from parts of the southeast. We have one thing that we're going to watch carefully over the weekend, and that is this tropical system. Just last night, you can see here on satellite, just before the sunset, this kind of tropical system. While we don't have, a lot of evidence that's going to become strong, moisture could be getting into Georgia out of this, and I want to see where that's going to go. Otherwise, there's a lot of ring of fire precipitation set up in this near-term pattern. Now, here's what we're going to be discussing in this video. As we look out there longer term, after discussing drought, the pattern over the next couple of weeks, when I start to get to some of these slides, it's going to be all about the new long-range content. And I want to look at it deeply, and I want to talk about some of the nuances to it, some of the what I think will be inaccuracies in it. And I want to talk about a particular year, 2010, that lately has been just kind of occupying a lot of my thought process about the longer term. But it's going to be about ridge placement this summer. And I've made a case, right, for weeks, that developing a big southeastern ridge has not been something that the models have put in permanently. Yet even without it, even without having that, we've developed drought across all of Ag South territory for the most part. So we have to ask if we're going to see some sort of ridge develop. And I'm going to make a case that I think that ridge is going to be back farther toward the Delta or even over toward the Red River Valley of the South. That's where I want to take this forecast and then blow it out in a longer range. Okay, so from here, let's go look at the system early this morning. So here it is. There's some of the outer rainfall bands that are coming into Florida and the circulation. Trying to tighten up a little bit here, but I'm not expecting much development out of this. This system could curl up into parts of southern Georgia, which we need to see if it's capable of doing. Now, right now, across Ag South, Ag Carolina, we are not on any sort of a hazard risk from the all hazards weather map. We do have the heat advisories, the heat watches and warnings to our north underneath the ridge, and then flooding that kind of extends here with some of the moisture from Alberto, and then just non-stop rain in the upper Midwest, which we're going to have to talk about in a minute for those of you that grow corn and soybeans in parts of the southeast. This is a critical thing to think about with respect to the corn crop right now. But as we get back into this, our last 72 hours of total precip, we've just had almost nothing. Outside of just a few scattered showers that tried to make their way in off the coast, it's been very dry. We just have questions as to the recent dryness, which has taken our top 16 inches of soil moisture and all but evaporated it, how long this is going to last. Now, remember, this is a flash drought scenario. We've had some heat that came in, we've been very dry, and we've been able to deplete soil moisture pretty quickly. We've just now made it onto the drought monitor, though. I show you this every Friday, but we finally made it on the drought monitor with a few patches of abnormally dry conditions. But it's a reminder that abnormally dry, doesn't reflect the near-term deficits, because this is a long-term indicator of drought, and we have to understand that. So thinking this through a little bit farther, let's just take a look nationally, and I'll zoom in on the southeast in a few moments. There are some other areas of interest that have gone over quite dry, like a big section of the central and eastern corn belt, parts of the northeast, this pocket of Oklahoma, and then much of the southwest, which is characteristic of this time of year. But I want to make a point about how wet things have been in this corridor here. We grow a lot of corn and soybeans in this region, and we have flood watches and warnings out right now. There's much more heavy rain coming, and I don't think that we've quite understood the full impact of how much wet weather is hitting this area. They were forced to plant and replant and do things very late in the month of May, meaning that this becomes very vulnerable to an early frost. In fact, if you planted 100-day corn in northern Iowa, southern Minnesota, and you didn't get to plant it till the end of May, the time that it reaches silking would be late July rather than early July, and it will likely get into black layer about the same time as the average first frost date. So if there's an early frost, we could have a major negative impact on this crop. And wait until you see how much more rain I've got coming for it here in a few moments. But it's in stark contrast to a year ago. A year ago, Big Ridge built up here into Canada. Flow came out of the east. So much of the Great Lakes states were dry. There was all the smoke and all the heavy rains lined up along the Rocky Mountains, and then they were stretched out down here. So we were super wet a year ago in this area, and right now we look like this. Our last 30 days, we've got pockets of Ag South and Ag Carolina territory that are below 30% of average on precipitation. And this flashed out scenario is getting quite serious. And with the heat that's coming in the near term, until we break this whole ridge pattern down, we have the risk of continuing to stay dry. Now it's not as though I don't have any hope, but I want you to understand that this was not well predicted, right? If you want to watch my videos from 2 months ago, we weren't talking about, late June dryness in this area or mid to late June dryness in this area. It wasn't there in the forecast. So keep that in mind when I get into these longer range updates in a few moments here. Now you know why I'm so keen on seeing if we can get something to come out of this tropical disturbance. National Hurricane Center gave it a 50% chance of developing, but the reality of it is this is not going to be a major precipitation producer for big acres down here. So thinking that all through, let's go and have a look at the models. We see that some rain bands, weak showers start to move in this afternoon, this evening into parts of coastal regions of Georgia and South Carolina and northern Florida. The circulation in the overnight hours getting into early Saturday morning moves into southern Georgia and could sit and spin here. Now, there's going to be some cloud cover, keeping things a bit cooler on Saturday, and possibly some decent rains that come out of this. I mean, that's a good long while that sits and spins on Saturday into Sunday. By the time we get into Sunday, a front tries to squeeze through the upper Midwest, through the Midwest, and over the Appalachian Mountains, but doesn't look to be able to deliver a lot of precipitation. So from now through the weekend, our precipitation pattern is going to be largely driven by just scattered pop-up storms and anything around the weak circulation you see here. Okay, getting beyond that, take a look at the bigger picture. The next 7 days, most of Ag South, Ag Carolina on the drier side of average. What about day 8 through 14? Again, this will be the critical time period. This point, June 28th to July the 5th. Where I'm going to be watching for this. I think there's better evidence that the ridging sets up here with flow coming over the top like that and ring of fire precipitation coming around like this. And what is yet to be fully understood is, do we get that coming all the way around into parts of the Carolinas with storms? Or does this northerly flow bring in drier air and keep us away from the wetter conditions? The problem is if you just look at the models and take them at face value and say, give me the next 2 weeks, so this is now all the way through the 5th of July, you get this. And that particular setup is one that continues to bring in our drought situation. So we're going to have to be watching for anything that could shift this pattern around and bring in some relief. Because I see above average temperatures and I see well below average precipitation for the southeast going forward. That's why it's so critical to get anything we can out of that tropical system that's going to be moving on shore late today into tomorrow and over the weekend. So, the ridge. This is what our pattern's trying to do. The problem in the southeast is that the flow aloft is just gone. It's all way up here, or around the big ridge, which by the Saturday moves there. And we just keep the upper level flow away. Like there's just no good upper level motion. And without that, what is there to spark development of anything? And that's been our trouble. We've not necessarily been just planted under a big, massive ridge for weeks. We have one now, but it's not been that way. It's just a lack of flow. So as we take a look at it, where's all the storms going to be? Well, today on the 21st, it's going to kind of line the ridge. We got chances for scattered storms here, but that's it. What about getting into Saturday? Okay, there's the front that's trying to advance, and by Sunday, yeah, we've got chances for storms as that frontal boundary tries to advance toward us. But this is not like a really, high chance of getting precip. So what do we end up getting? It's all around the ridge the storms fire all weekend long. And here comes the front through the Midwest on Saturday that we're going to watch to see if by Sunday it can get to us. But in reality, it's the pattern that's going to dictate all of this. So focus in on this with me, okay? This is your next 15 days. Playing into the weekend, take a look at where the jet stream lives. Here, here, here. The large ridge that was over us is now open back up into the southern plains, into the southwest. And what I want to know is early next week, can we get something to come off the backside of this trough to drive some moisture into us by mid to late week? That's what we have to ask. Because this is Monday, there's another one coming on Tuesday, Wednesday, and the ridge is living here by midweek next week. So can that frontal boundary mid to late next week come through and deliver some much needed rain? That would be important to see. Okay, that's next week, late next week. What about after that? Well, by the 28th, 29th, and 30th, we just kind of see more open ridging. It's not a big anchored ridge, but the flow is just north. That's the issue. So we get back into a warmer and drier regime overall as we approach the end of this month and start the month of July. But I still think that the greatest risk is here. And if the ridge does in fact live over the Red River Valley to the Delta, that area, we have to call into question what flow around this ridge could do for the southeast. You saw that the models are drier, but what does kind of history tell us with respect to that? So we need to get in and think about those things. So here we go. The next 7 days from the artificial intelligence forecasting system, it's got drier conditions planted in the Red River Valley, but it's still drier here. But take note, it is trying to bring in some moisture into parts of Georgia, coastal North and South Carolina. Some of that's coming from the tropical system now. What about the national blend of models? Very dry into this area. But there's this front late next week we have to talk about. What about the WPC? Very similar. Isolated storms possible. Wetter as you get into southern Georgia. That's very consistent, but the driest is here. What about the European model? It's trying to show that front coming through, but this is not widespread drought relief. It's going to be rain for some, but not everyone. And if you look at the GFS, it's maybe the most aggressive on trying to bring that front through to bring better rain to western parts of North and South Carolina and northern parts of Georgia. But what I want to get is the timing. And I've liked the GFS solution on this. So there's our first front, the one that comes through the Midwest on Sunday into Monday that tries to bring in some scattered showers on Monday into Tuesday. But it's this next one right there. There it is, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. There it is, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday that comes through, giving us our next best chance as a big dome of high pressure builds into the Midwest. So given all of that, let's go watch it in the models. You know that in the near term, not a whole lot going on. There's a little tropical system and the moisture it brings in on Saturday. There's the front that clears the Midwest on Sunday and tries to bring in some scattered rain. Look at this, Monday into Tuesday, but not a whole lot. So then we get through the start of next week, Tuesday into Wednesday, and we're going to keep an eye on this front by Wednesday afternoon and evening, sliding over us on Thursday. So as it stands, if you're not in the path of the would-be tropical system that comes into Georgia, I think your next best chance at getting good rainfall is next Thursday. That's what I'm seeing in the forecast here. After that, higher pressure builds back in. Now, what's interesting is the European model, and this would be really interesting. European model brings in high pressure here, but starts to develop some tropical low pressure right there. And now this is way out in a single forecast run, but it's trying to do something. And we got to keep an eye on that. Low confidence, no confidence at all right now, but we'll watch it. Probability-wise, this is the chance it's staying under a half inch. You know that the European model was drier in this area. The GFS was wetter. But that's where the risk of being the driest is over the next 10 days. Chance of getting over an inch, possibly lining the coast, and then down here across the Gulf Coast seems to be the highest chances of getting wettest. So thinking all of this through, let's look out there now at week 2. Remember, the European model tries to keep this ridge anchored somewhere in this area, and that's got us drier. We know that the GFS has a known dry bias in its ensemble, and the CPC, they've gone for near normal precipitation. I still think the risk is drier across a lot of this area after the front comes through next Thursday. So I'm buying more into this forecast than the others. Temperature-wise, we've gotten through much of the last 30 days avoiding significant heat. We've had some warm days, but we've avoided the significant long-duration heat. But if you look at where the temperatures are going, this is today's temperatures on Friday into Saturday. A lot of mid-90s here. This is all just cooled off by the cloud cover. As we go into Sunday and Monday, the temperatures are really going up to the mid to upper 90s. This is when the ridge is really opening up across a broader section here of the country. There's Tuesday into Wednesday. There's the front that's got to come through the Midwest first on Wednesday before it gets to us on Thursday into Friday. That's when we can start to back the temperatures off a little bit. But you notice that the temperatures are climbing back up into the mid-90s, which is going to increase our evaporation rates and make this local flash drought issue worse until we get that chance of rain next Thursday. Beyond that, this is what the day 5 through 10 outlook shows up in the GFS, warmer than average. The day 10 through 15, warmer than average again. Now, as you look out there in the European model, it's got us day 5 through 10 and day 10 through 15 maintaining the warmer than average. And this is the story. The warmth that's here and the cool that's here drives the jet stream right in between the two, and that means it stays out of our area. That's why I'm concerned about the sliding ridge that's going to go back and forth in this area, I think, as we finish June and start July. And that limits our precipitation chances. Literally in the next 10 days, unless you get this tropical system down in Georgia, next Thursday, I think, is our best bet. Now, what about beyond that? Now, this is where things get really, confusing in the models. They keep the heat on the 5th of July to the 11th, and then the 12th through the 18th. We see a lot of warmth to the south and cooler to the north. But look at the precipitation pattern. By mid-July, the models are trying to anchor a ridge down here and just bring storms over the top of this into the southeast. And I'll be honest with you, the long-range models have been over-promising precipitation for a while. But if they do in fact build all of the heat into this area, it's at least not over the southeast. And even the European model out there is trying to just give us better chances of rainfall in the month of July. I'm going to call this majorly into question until I finally see if the ridge is placed here. I need you to know and understand that. That's going to be critical. What's interesting is the CPC just came out with their update on the 20th, and they've got something entirely different. They're trying to anchor heat here and here rather than right there where I'm putting it. And they've got dryness in the Ohio Valley, which is there now, but I think this dryness extends into this area. And I think we run the risk of being drier in the southeast because of that ridge placement. But the CPC has got more of this showing up wet. But these models have been aggressively over-predicting precipitation, in my opinion, for a while in that area. And I think we're just going to have to keep thinking that through as we go forward. How have they been over-predicting? The seasonal drought outlook, they've not put you in their seasonal drought outlook. So they don't have the drought development likely. But I'll be honest, until I see where that ridge is going to be, I'm concerned that your flash drought scenario continues. All right, let's look at another outlook. This is from the newest update from the National Multi-Model Ensemble. Now, what is it doing? It's trying to place the biggest ridging way back here. And it's trying to bring in a lot of Gulf moisture and Atlantic moisture through July into August and September. Is that consistent with the other models? Well, here's the new JMA. This is from the Japanese. What I'm most intrigued about this is the pressure patterns, which they've got weaker than average pressure in this area with the big ridge over here. Can you tuck that away in the back of your mind for a little bit? Because of this pattern, they've gone over wetter for you. See the color bar? That's June, July, August. What about the European model? It's wetter too. It's trying to bring in some dryness like mid-south into the Ohio Valley and then a big area of dryness here. But I can't make any sense of this pattern. And here's the newest one. This was just released. This is the July, August, September outlook from the IRI multi-model probability forecast system. It's got a couple of areas where there's likely below average precip, but I see all of this and I'm wondering if it's actually here. And that's my thought process. So let me add another flavor to this. Here's our current ocean temperatures. We have very warm Atlantic Ocean temperatures. We have the North Pacific giving us a boundary. See it right there? And that boundary is giving us this profile of temperature in lower atmosphere where we're warm to the south, as you can see by the colors, and cool to the north. And that's what's driving the jet stream. It's coming right across this area and living across the U.S.-Canada border. La Nina is not a factor yet. It's trying to develop. The trade winds are a little bit stronger than normal, but it's still not a factor, which means we're going to have to just see if this ends up dropping a ridge in here that at times slides over into the southeast. So when I looked at this, I'm just trying to find if there's anything close to an analog. And you know that I've looked at 2020 as one year, but I've now been looking a lot at 2010. You're going, wait a minute, that's 2010 by June 21st, and this is 2024? Yeah, they look a lot different. But I want to show you something here. The cool water off the west coast and the more prominent La Nina with the warm Atlantic are similar to this year when you compare our globally averaged ocean temperatures to any specific region. In other words, if you take the global average and make an anomaly map from it, you get this. So now we start to see a little bit more of a La Nina signal and that cooler water here and the warmer water there and the warmer water that's in the Atlantic. This is the big difference. And that's something we have to have a talk about. Because if you look here this year and compare it to 2010, that was the opposite sign. Now let that sit in your brain for just a second. Because in 2010, this is what our precipitation patterns look like in summer. We had drought that tried to develop in parts of the Mid-South. There was a bigger ridge that lived here, and all around the edge, we had storms that fired all summer. Very wet in the upper Midwest. And if that repeats itself, this is going to be major yield loss in the upper Midwest for this year. From there, I want to show you what the pattern did. It went over a ridge here, trough in the Gulf of Alaska, trough in the Aleutian Islands, ridge in the Gulf of Alaska, trough ridge, right there. And that's what I've been worried about right now, right? Where that thing is going to be. So thinking that through, we did have patchy dryness June to August, very wet in the upper Midwest. That's this global map of precipitation that resulted from that pattern you just saw. This was also either where there's major wildfires and drought risk in Western Russia. That was a terrible year for them. Thinking it through, though, we are here right now. Now watch this. We have a ridge here, a ridge here, one there, here, and here. That's 6 ridges. And the flow, the jet stream, is like this. Now, how close is this to 2010? Take this ridge, and in July, slide it there. Take this ridge and just move it over there a little bit. Take this trough and slide it in right here. Take this ridge and move it up a bit farther. And take this ridge and move it over. That's how close we are. So I'm thinking a lot about that particular year. And by the way, it did eventually storm in summer. And then later in the summer, it even led to an active hurricane season. That's why 2010 is currently renting some space in my head. So if you want to know what I am most keen on understanding is how do these pressure patterns end up moving the ridge here? Does it keep the jet stream pretty far to the north? Yes, but where does this ridge go? Is it a Red River Valley or is it an Ohio River Valley ridge? That is what we don't know. So thinking this through, right now, this is what that pattern's doing. Because by the way, that's a 15-day forecast map. All of it together the next 15 days. This is what the temperature pattern is doing in response to that. And this is what the precipitation pattern globally is doing in response to this. Now, other areas that I'm watching very carefully. Take a look at the latest Global Vegetation Health Index map. These would represent where conditions are worse than they were a year ago, and this is better. If we click on the map in the United States, you can see that a lot of the southeast is worse than it was a year ago. The plains, worse this year than it was a year ago. The upper Midwest, worse it was than a year ago. Mexico's drought, which has lately been cured by Alberto and then the system following it, it's going to start to look better, but it was pretty rough. What about over here? Eastern Ukraine, Western Russia. This whole region is continuing to show up with drought conditions. And even though storms may hit this region this weekend, I still think it's not enough to undo it. India's monsoon is late. Dryness in the cotton belt of India, which is right in through here. The Ganges River Valley, also very, very dry with exceptional heat. In Australia, they're in winter right now, but Western Australia, South Australia, Victoria, New South Wales, much lower NDVI this year than they had a year ago. Now, the Sahel is what's really captivating me because it is, as you look at it here, producing a lot of dust over the next 10 days that's coming out into the open Atlantic Ocean. This is often an indicator of strong trade winds and also an indicator of active convection between the Sahel and the rainforest to the south. And if you think on this line of 2010, remember in 2010, because the ridge lived way up here, most of our storms in 2010 made a turn like this. But early in the season, we had a couple of them that came out in the same area where they've gone this year. My adjustment is simply this. If the ridge isn't there, but instead over the warm water, we're going to push more of these in to our coast. And that's where I'm going to finish this whole analysis today. If I could just take you back to let's go to a different map than that one. How about this one? If we end up developing higher pressure here, listen carefully, okay? I think the high pressure is going to have to sit here over the Red River Valley and here north of Hawaii. And what this is going to do is this is going to steer more of these tropical systems in like this late in the season. So you say, Eric, put it all together in one statement. We've been very dry as of late. There's a ridge over us now giving us one chance at good rain. That's next Thursday. The heat's coming back up. As we move forward, if this ridge does in fact settle over the Red River Valley at the south, we open our chances to better precipitation later in the month of July into August and September, followed up by an active hurricane season. This is not an ideal year. And what's going on with this pattern is putting us right on the knife's edge of possibly falling off into more risky situations with our crops, which is why we're going to have to monitor this carefully. But that's what I've got for you. That's my latest outlook. And it was a lot, and there's low confidence, and it's a bit confusing, but these are the things I'm keeping an eye on. So I'll stop it there. Have a good rest of your week, and I'll talk to you soon. Thank you.